Hello everyone, my name is Reed and welcome to Storytime. Today we are going to be reading some malicious compliance stories, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. My bully. When I was 8 years old, my dad and brothers moved across the country. My brother started high school while my dad started a new job. My mom and I stayed back so she could sell our house before we moved to join them. During this time, my dad asked my uncle to keep an eye on my mom and I. While selling the house, we moved in with my uncle and his family. It was in a different area, so I had to go to a different school where I didn't know anyone. A few weeks into the school year, and a much larger kid, 2 grades above me, decided I would be his target for the year. It started small. He would knock things out of my hands or push me when we crossed paths. Then he started stealing things from me. I put up with it because I didn't think I had a choice at that time. I was working up the courage to fight back like my dad told me to, but this kid was huge, so my courage wasn't building fast enough. One day I went to the bathroom during recess and ran into him in the bathroom. I knew that out of the view of teachers, this wasn't going to be fun. As expected, he pummeled me right up until the bell rang. Unfortunately for him, he left a lot of noticeable marks on my face. I had a fat lip, a shiner, and a bloody nose. A teacher noticed this right away and sent me to the office. Once there, I was ticked and told the principal everything. He called down the bully who denied doing anything to me, ever. The principal knew he was lying, so he scheduled an appointment with both sets of parents. That night, my mom and uncle went with me and his parents went with him. Once in there, his parents constantly denied that their kid did anything and even said I was bullying him. I was 8 and could see how ridiculous that was. The principal had another meeting to be at, so he asked that we meet again in the next night to resolve this. The bully's father started complaining and saying that if I bully him again, that he is okay with his son defending himself. He made a point of saying that just because you lose the fight doesn't mean you weren't the bully, which I guess is technically true, except in this situation his son was definitely the bully. Everyone agreed to meet the next night, and we left school. As we were getting into our cars, my uncle went over to the bully's father and put his arm around him. He walked him to where I assume he thought was out of sight. It wasn't. My uncle beat this guy up really badly. Then, as the bully's father was laying on the ground covered in his own blood, my uncle leaned in and said something. He came back and everyone remained silent for the rest of the night. The next day, my bully was not in class. That evening, we all went to meet up with the principal, and the bully's father looked like those UFC post-fight photos, lumps and bruises everywhere. The principal asked what happened, and my uncle responded by saying that the bully's father was bullying him and he defended himself. Just because he lost the fight doesn't mean that he wasn't the bully. The principal took a moment, then looked at the bully's father and said, "Is that true?" The bully's father looked at the principal and said, "Yes, sir." Then he said that his son needed to say something. My bully stood up and began apologizing as he broke into tears. He confessed to everything and said that he will never bully anyone ever again. Then the father apologized for not believing me and the way he treated me. My uncle looked at the principal and said, "I think we can accept that apology. Is there anything else?" The principal said no and let us go. For the short time I was stuck going to that school, the bully went the long way around me whenever he saw me. Alright, what a great story. I guess the moral of it is violence is the answer? He is allowed to defend himself? Years and years ago, when my oldest son was about 4, we had him in a pretty good daycare center about a block or 2 from where we both worked. After a while, though, he started getting incident reports, usually with one other boy biting my son. We complained after the second event and were assured it wouldn't happen again, but of course it did. Now, we really liked the daycare teachers and caregivers. It was just the administrator who wasn't very good. She wanted to avoid confrontations, she tried to calm us down, she didn't want to confront the other parents. Basically, she did nothing and hoped things would go away. Finally, in one meeting after yet another biting incident report, I asked why the biter didn't get suspended or kicked out. Well, he hadn't hit my son, so if he hit my son, he'd be out. But not for biting? No, that's what the rules say. It was something stupid about infants crawling around, occasionally gnaw on one another, and they didn't know better, so they made a one-size-fits-all rule. the director suggested that my son really should defend himself. I'm sure she was thinking of pushing the biter away or staying away from him or calling a teacher, something very passive, which is what she always advocated. Okay, let me make sure of this. If my son defends himself, he won't get in trouble. Nope. Okay, I can work with those rules. Wicked grin on my face, and my wife got a little worried. My son and I had a little project out behind the garage for quite a few evenings. The next time the biter got my son, the fruit of my loins laid him out. Really laid him out, just like I taught him. So we got summoned from work to a meeting at the daycare with the director and the other kids' parents. They were rather furious, so I waved the stack of incident reports of their young whelp biting my son. But my son hit theirs. Hitting was a suspension offense. With a grin, I repeated what the director had told me, that he was allowed to defend himself. He did so, just a bit aggressively. She nodded that I was right, cringing at having her own words used to defend what my son had done. The other kid was kicked out. The director wasn't happy with me, but as I told her, I knew I was going to have to take my kid out behind the house and teach him to defend himself. I didn't think it would be before kindergarten, though. I asked her if she'd rather my son defended himself or that I'd have called Children's Protective Services, and she would probably have lost her job. She really didn't like me and was glad when I left. Yeah, all of this could have been avoided if the other kid would have just been suspended earlier. I'm sure there was a rule change after this incident. Maliciously complied and locked my boss out of his home. I used to work as a property manager for a semi-large company in a small city. Along with the usual duties of a PM, we were also responsible for after-hours maintenance calls. Originally, we were paid for 3 hours of overtime to cover the calls we answer and paid an additional $80 for any call-outs we have to attend ourselves. The entire team rotated the phone between us, so we only had the emergency phone for one weekend every 2 months. The phone was an after-hours maintenance line for over 800 properties, so you can imagine how busy it would get, but the extra pay helped the blow of losing your weekend. This was not a problem until our boss wanted to crack down on overtime hours, stating, "I very much doubt you are working 3 hours whilst you have the emergency phone." His new rule was for each staff member to document when and who called and would be paid an hour of regular time each call, but under no circumstances are you to attend any issues yourself. This includes unlocking doors for tenants who are locked out of their property. He enforced that the tenant must pay for a locksmith to attend and let themselves in. This angered many of our clients and caused us to be constantly abused over the phone by our tenants as they had to pay $300 for a locksmith. This is where the malicious compliance begins. We indeed documented all of our calls, which instead of paying each employee $100 for 3 hours, he ended up having to pay us $500 or more each weekend due to the amount of calls we would actually take. But it doesn't stop there. What I should probably mention is that our company can provide accommodation for our more higher staff at a fraction of the cost you would normally pay. The manager in question was in such accommodation, and lo and behold, he managed to lock himself out of his apartment at 11 p.m. on a Friday night. Manager: "Hello, OP. I have locked myself out of my apartment. You need to collect the spare keys and come and unlock my door." OP: "I am very sorry, manager, but I cannot do that." Excuse me? Why not?" "Unfortunately, you have instructed me not to attend any call-outs under any circumstance. I can, however, send you through the number of our preferred locksmiths to come and let you in." After a few choice words, the manager hung up and phoned a locksmith. Let's just say, after he had to fork out $300 for an after-hours locksmith, he changed our ability to attend call-outs. Hey manager, if you play a stupid game, you win a stupid prize. 2 times the malicious compliance stops all work. In my last position, I was an IT contractor for the government. One of our roles was administration of the security suite. One of the ways this worked was through policies. For example, we would get a policy to block all Adobe Flash in our enterprise, update the security suite with this policy, and now all Flash-based software is disabled. Our government lead would direct what policies to push to all workstations, and we would have to follow without question. Most of the time, the policies would come from recent security threats, updates from the manufacturer, or seemingly just intuition. Again, since we were all contractors, we would have to follow the instructions from the government no matter how absurd it may seem. In 2 particular instances, this caused a major stoppage of work for all our in-house and remote staff. The first incident that came through was a policy to block all temp files. We knew this would cause a myriad of problems, but we had to push the policy anyways. You see, all applications publish temp files for various uses. If you go into your computer files, do a wildcard search for *.tmp, you will see likely thousands of temp files. Our organization was primarily composed of developers who discovered that all of the applications that they worked on could no longer function correctly. Amazingly, it took 2 days for the government lead to tell us to rescind that policy. I can't imagine how many lost work hours that cost. The second incident was a much more egregious error that had to be based on intuition. We got a policy to block all .exe files, executable files. We knew immediately this would cause major issues. Now, it's common knowledge to never run a .exe file that you download from the internet unless you know what it is and can check the validity. But to not allow .exe files in an enterprise? Well, let's just say that you no longer can execute anything on a computer. Word.exe, Outlook.exe, Firefox, etc. That's right, every single user was locked out of every application they could possibly run. We started getting calls within minutes of nothing working. Word was sent up to the government lead of the likely cause of the snafu. This time it took 2 hours to rescind the policy. You would think that if you heard your IT person say, "This is going to break everything, let's not do it," you wouldn't tell them to do it anyways. This is stupid. Alright everyone, that's all the time we have for today. If you liked what you heard, subscribe for more content like this daily, and have an amazing day.